Hey, Marianne Talbot, welcome. Thank you very much for taking this request for an interview. I'm happy that you're here with us.
My pleasure. Thanks much.
Yes, so I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I mean, some of this we've been talking about them for some time, but I want our listeners, both people in our knowledge society, and then our broader listeners to understand about your life, about your work, and about your philosophy. Okay, so I'm going to ask you. I have 9 questions here, and we're going to take, I mean, less than an hour for sure, but let's start them. And if you have some questions for me and for our knowledge society, for Mindshop, you can of course go ahead and ask them. So the first question I always ask is about your academic trajectory. So what key attitudes and strategies do you think an intellectual has to develop across the years to make substantial progress on his field? And personally speaking, how have you managed to stay motivated and focused on your work across time?
Well, to take the last bit first, staying motivated has never been a problem because, I mean, the minute I discovered philosophy, I loved it, and I've loved it pretty much ever since. And so that's always been my motivation. I don't, I mean, I find it as fascinating now as I did 40 years ago.
Amazing.
And it's as fresh now as it was 40 years ago. So that's not been a problem at all. I don't think I can talk about the key trajectory that an academic ought to take, because I don't think I've taken one. No, I don't. I mean, in a way, I haven't done the things that I should have done. I should have published a lot more than I have done. I mean, that's the key thing that any academic these days has got to do, is publish. Okay. And I came in a little before that started, if you like. So although I've published books, I haven't published nearly as much as I should have done to stay at the top of my field.
And out of curiosity, why is that? Why didn't you decide to publish more?
I mean, for me, teaching was always the most important thing. And I although I haven't published, I have done podcasts that have been downloaded millions of times by people all over the world.
Okay. Well,
how we met, I can't remember. Maybe it was.
You took a different route, but does that necessarily mean that that's not what an academic should do? Or
well, I do think that it's much narrower these days for academics than it used to be. I do think publish or perish have got to be the key words for academics.
Okay. Publish or perish. Okay, I haven't heard that. All right.
I do not know. It's the key theme.
The key theme. Okay. Sounds, well, makes sense in an academic, strictly academic kind of sense.
I mean, I do think this is, in a way, this is short-sighted. I mean, Kant, for example, didn't publish anything till he was 47.
That's true.
But then, my goodness me.
Wow, he was a machine, a publishing machine, right?
It's rather the quality of what he published rather than the amount. Well, I mean, he didn't do so badly on the amount, but the quality was stupendous. Yeah. And I do think that the concentration on the amount you publish is backwards looking for academia, because I think that people should concentrate more on the quality than on the quantity.
I totally agree. Especially in the world we live in, that we are so many people, that there's so much information. It's always that we got to focus on the quality. So, so the second question is about studying philosophy. I remember you told me about getting into philosophy as a mature student, and this was deeply inspiring to me. I think you're going to remember that I'd emailed you and we spoke, and we can tell that as well. And I think for many people, this will be inspiring as well, both in our society and for our audience. And just to give you some context, our society has 430 students from all over the world. We're actually in 140 cities around the world, and mainly in Latin America, but some people are in Spain, some people are in Sweden, in the US, but all of them speak Spanish, right? And the average age of our members is 26, 27 approx.
Wow.
And it's people that study psychology. We have engineers, we have veterinarians, we have odontologists, we have doctors, and people from master's level. We have some people that have PhDs, some people that are on undergrad, and etc. But could you tell us a bit about your decision to enter into philosophy as a mature student and your experience in it?
Yes. It's interesting you say that the average age is 26. 26 was the age I was when I started my undergraduate.
Wow. Wow.
Yes. So 26 is an important age, I think. Yeah. I left school very early. I was, in fact, thrown out of school when I was 15.
Could you tell us about that? How was that?
I absolutely hated school. I hated it and was very happy to leave early. And so then I traveled quite a lot. I went to Australia. I went across on the hippie trail, if you've ever heard of that.
Yes, I have.
I've got something in my eye now.
Oh.
The hippie trail goes across Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, over to Australia. And I did all that.
Wow.
And when I came back, I was yearning for some sort of intellectual stimulation. And I did an Open University course. We have a wonderful thing called the Open University in Britain. And in the middle of it, I came to a philosophy part. And in those days, they did logic. And I sat up all night doing this logic, which I thought was the most difficult thing I had ever come across in my life. But then I also thought it was the most interesting thing I'd ever come across in my life. And then I got a good mark for it. And of course, that always helps.
Yeah.
And from then on, I just lived and breathed philosophy and couldn't wait to become an undergraduate. And of course, because I had no qualifications at all, I was very lucky to get into the University of London.
And which University of London? Which
Bedford College.
Bedford
I mean, it was
College.
magical because it was in the middle of Regent's Park in London. And it was absolutely beautiful.
Amazing.
And I spent 3 years just walking on air, doing something I adored in a place that was so beautiful.
It really changes, right? When you find something that clicks, like with.
Oh yes, absolutely. No, it was. I was lucky enough to find absolutely my passion, and it has lasted my whole career. I mean, I retired this September.
Oh, really? You're going to retire this September?
Yep.
Wow.
And it's lasted my whole career. I mean, how lucky is that?
Yeah, it is. It's a very lucky thing to be in, because today people get frustrated a lot and people change careers very often. So that's great. Great.
I think changing careers is good. If you're not in the right one, you should change.
Well, I agree. But changing every 5 or 10 years, that could be problematic, well, in some cases, right?
Yes. Oh, it could be. Yeah.
So moving on about Oxford University of Oxford, could you tell us the story of how you got to Oxford and how this experience has been?
Well, I was at the University of London for 3 years.
Okay.
And then I did very well. I got a first-class degree, which is the best you can get. And one of my tutors persuaded me to apply for Oxford, which I did. Within a week, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I got my first-class degree.
Wow.
So it was a very strange time.
I didn't know this. I think you did.
And the Corpus Christi, which was my Oxford college,
yep,
said that I could intermit if I wanted. I could defer for a year. And I said no.
This was a DPhil, or a BPhil?
Well, it was for a BPhil on the road to a DPhil.
On the road to a DPhil. There's an option there's a route to go straight into the DPhil. Amazing.
No, there isn't a route straight into the DPhil. You have to start with the BPhil and then transfer to the DPhil.
Okay. You have to transfer. And then after you finished this, you started working there, or how was the connection?
Well, I mean, when I was completing the BPhil, as I said, it was a very difficult time, very difficult time. But as I was completing it, I was offered a job at Pembroke College.
Pembroke.
And actually, you asked me earlier, what trajectory should an academic take? I was stupid enough to take that job.
Wow.
And it was stupid. I should have stuck to my DPhil. I should have said no jobs until I've got my DPhil. Because once you have a job, the motivation for completing a DPhil lessens. And of course, you haven't got the time to complete a DPhil. So I never actually did complete my DPhil.
I understand.
But that was because I took this job rather too early.
Of course, you decided to take the job. Yeah. And then you got into continuing education, right? That's where,
Well, that was quite a lot later. I went from Pembroke to Brasenose College.
Brasenose College.
Also in Oxford.
To teach.
To teach philosophy. Yes.
To teach philosophy. And what subjects did you teach? What were the modules?
Well, Oxford's a bit strange like that. In Oxford, you have a very wide teaching competence. So my specialisms are ethics, logic, and the philosophy of mind. But my competencies are very wide.
So you taught metaphysics, epistemology, everything, aesthetics.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing.
No, not aesthetics, actually. That was one of the aesthetics and religion, two philosophies I didn't ever do.
Okay, philosophy of religion. And then, as some people already know in our society, and people that listen to our videos on our YouTube channel, they know that you do podcasts, as you have already mentioned. And I wanted to ask you, how did you get involved in these podcasts? Because
again, that was quite a lot later. Because after 10 years or 11 years at Brasenose, I then got the job as Director of Studies in Philosophy at Continuing Education. And at the same time, my mother, who had dementia, moved in with me. And I looked after her for the 5 years until she died, which was a very interesting and very important period, because I think there's no point whatsoever in being a philosopher if you don't actually live your philosophy every day of your life.
Yes.
And this was something that I could not have left my mother at that point to go into her home.
Wow.
And it was a matter of integrity from my point of view. It was a matter of compassion from her point of view. And I knew that it was also, I mean, if we're talking about academic trajectories, do not take your mother with dementia to live with you.
Well, you can't really say that. I would. Well, you can say it, but I think you did the right thing. You did.
I'm absolutely. I am completely confident I did the right thing, and I've never regretted it.
Of course.
But it did interfere quite significantly with my career. And in fact, when Mum died, I thought my career was pretty well stone dead. But now we get on to the podcasts. Almost coincidentally with my mum's death, the university approached me and said, would I mind having some of my lectures podcast?
And it was you, right?
Podcast was. But I thought, well, it couldn't hurt, could it? As from what they told me, it just involved them videoing me while I lectured. So I would give a bog standard lecture, and they would video me. Anyway, so that's what they did. And then I forgot all about it until I got an email from the chap in charge of all this podcasting who said, did you know that you're world number one? I mean, this came, as far as I was concerned, it was completely out of the blue. I'd forgotten all about the podcasting.
That's how I knew about you. I was in Brazil, and the podcast I saw was a romp through the history of philosophy. Was that the first one?
That was the first one, yes.
That was the first one. But then you did critical reasoning and you did some others, right?
Well, when Peter told me that it was number one, I said, what does this mean? I was thinking, how many downloads a week? I was thinking 100, something like that. He said 18,000. Wow. And in the end, it was downloaded 3 million times. But then, as you say, critical reasoning is the one that has been most popular over time.
Yeah.
That one's been downloaded 7 million times. Yeah. And it once held every single one of the top 10 slots.
Wow.
Because there are 6 different lectures as part of that podcast.
Yeah, this is a very interesting phenomena, if we can call it like that, because a lot of people that really would never have access to something like this can do it from...
I think it's absolutely marvelous. I see it as part of the democratization of education. Yes. And philosophy, which is the only thing I really care about. Yeah. But I think, I mean, in a way, this pandemic has been hugely helpful in this, because it's accelerated the move online by 20 years, I would say. So Oxford has put lectures online. Anyone, I mean, from Brazil, anywhere in South America, anywhere in Africa, the lectures of the University of Oxford can be accessed every week.
And I mean, I suppose they have subtitles as well, right? Do they have subtitles in different languages?
No, some of them, and you can usually
request them, maybe?
Request captions, I understand.
Yeah. That really, that may represent a barrier for some people, but I mean, I have some of our members, because the way I teach, I always teach in Spanish, of course, but my readings, I have primary readings and secondary readings. Both of them are both in Spanish and in English. And some of the members don't speak English, but they set them, I mean, they set a challenge to themselves to start learning, and they start reading, and and that's a tool, because if you like something, you find a way to understand it.
Yes, absolutely. I'm learning Russian at the moment, and
wow.
I sympathize with anyone who's learning English. I think English must be as difficult as Russian. Russian is very difficult.
And why are you learning Russian? Because
I went to Russia on an academic exchange a couple of years ago, and absolutely loved it.
Wow, amazing! I would love to go to Russia someday, perhaps after this pandemic. I don't know.
Well, it'll have to be after this pandemic.
Yeah, there's no option there. So then on to the next question. This year, I'm teaching ethics on Mindshop, right? But I'm teaching it at a general level. We're doing. We're seeing 11 ethicists in 11 weeks, right? The first class, the first lecture is general, right? But then we start with, we see Epicurus, because we already seen Aristotle. The first year of Mindshop was history of philosophy. So I went straight into Epicurus, then Thomas Aquinas, then Hume, then Kant, and so on. Do you have, I imagine you do, do you have any particular ethicists that are your favorites? I mean, the philosophers that mostly impacted you in the way you think?
In ethics or in anything?
In ethics, ethicists, yes.
I mean, the fact is, all the great philosophers are great. Yeah. I mean, Aristotle, Hume, Kant. I mean, I'm temporarily more attracted to Aristotle and Kant than I am to Hume. Mm. But I mean, Hume is also great. And John Stuart Mill, I mean, all of these people are well worth reading, because I don't think when you properly understand, and of course, you can never really claim to properly understand, when you look beyond the superficial
Mhm.
All these things are very moving, and all of them have surely a claim to be at least part of the truth. And I think, if someone has some part of the truth, then I want to know what it is,
Definitely, definitely.
and
Yeah,
especially when it comes to right and wrong.
yeah, it is a very tough matter because I mean every human has to take choices. You know, everyone has to decide many things, some harder, some easier, but we all need
Yeah.
ethics, right? Like,
Well, it's funny. One of the things I do is teach graduate physicists and engineers, um, and I'm often told by them that ethics is pointless.
wow. Yeah, I took one of your. Remember when we were at it was Imperial College, London,
Oh
right?
yes, okay. I'd forgotten that you came to one of those.
Yeah, I went to your lecture. It was research ethics. Research ethics. That's the
Mhm.
one we took, and yeah, it's tough, right? Because not everyone takes it seriously, but and
Well, I mean, the fact is, it was a course that was compulsory for them, and there's also always something a little bit irritating about being made to do something, the
yeah,
point of which you can't see,
yeah.
when you've got so many other things that you want to do that you're really interested in. So I do understand. And I saw it as my job always to persuade them that ethics is important, is interesting, and every scientist has a duty, especially to
Yeah.
consider the ethical implications of what they do, given how powerful they are.
Yeah. And talking a little bit about contemporary ethics. Well, I mean, just as some context, right? What Nietzsche raised in his time, like with the genealogy of morality, the death of God, and all of this, how he saw that ethics was very intertwined with religion, and there was a kind of a fake conscious in ethics. And he criticized also philosophers, and he kind of opened a new path for ethics in independent from religion, like an independent ethics. And on this, we have Derek Parfit and many others. But what do you think about Derek Parfit's work on reasons and persons and his triple theory?
To be honest, I'm much less familiar with it than you would think that I should be.
Really? Because he was from Oxford, right? I
Oh
mean,
yes, well yes, but that so have many other philosophers.
of course. But I imagine that maybe I don't know if you ever read his work or even met him.
Oh yes, of course I read some of his work, but I mean, you talk as if Nietzsche was the first one to separate ethics from religion.
Well,
But of course, Aristotle didn't see
oh,
religion as part of ethics, and
I
neither did
agree.
Plato. And
Yeah, but I mean, in a much more modern way, because kind of many people maybe not forgot, but it was under the radar, and Nietzsche kind of broke the mold, right? Like it was
I
very,
think he didn't break the mold for philosophy. He broke the
yeah,
mold.
of
He
course.
brought into public consciousness
Yes, that's what I
the
mean. Yeah,
fact that ethics and religion are separable.
true. He brought it
Um,
to public consciousness. That's the right way to put it. I agree. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure he did. Well, he did do a favor. I mean, it's a bit of a shame that
Yeah.
so many people still think that religion and ethics go together, and therefore, as the world moves away from religion, it also moves away from ethics, which of course is disastrous.
Yes.
Um,
Mm.
so I think it's very important to separate the two and to explain the motivation for ethics independently of religion.
I completely agree. I couldn't agree more because, and especially on this side of the world, on Latin America, there is still a lot of influence, and it's kind of a monopoly because religion on this side of the world has taken ethics as hostage, and people really cannot differentiate. Uh, I don't know.
Yes. Well, I think, Catholicism and Protestantism,
Protestantism,
I'm tripping over my tongue, have got very different attitudes to the ethical mores of their religion. I mean, Protestantism is much more live and let live sort of thing. Well, I don't know. No, I mustn't get into sociology,
Yeah,
and I
agree.
certainly mustn't get into religious sociology.
Yeah, I agree. It was just a general comment, but yes. Moving on to bioethics. So you wrote a book on bioethics. Could you tell us a bit about the experience? And I mean, how was it for you? How long did it take? And how was the repercussion of your textbook?
This was. I had actually written 2 courses on bioethics, a short online course for the University of Oxford, and then a longer master's course also for the University of Oxford. And I was approached by the University of Cambridge to write a book for the Cambridge University Press. Mm-hmm. And so I agreed, and I did that. I quite enjoyed writing it, actually. You asked me how long it took me. I can't remember, probably 2 years. Yes, 2 years, of which 1 year was really serious, solid working on it.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Great. I haven't read it, but I have it definitely on my to-read list, because do you, I mean, the level, is it a master's level book or more?
I mean, it's originally the title was An Introduction to Bioethics for Scientists. But then Cambridge University Press decided that was narrowing the readership.
True.
And so it asked me to drop the for scientists and modify the content to reflect that. So, I mean, it's anyone from 6th form last year at school people through undergraduates, graduate students, or interested.
Okay. Is it in different languages? Is it only in English?
Well, not quite. It's in English and in Indonesian, believe it or not.
Okay, that's interesting. Did someone approach you to make the translation?
They didn't approach me. They approached Cambridge.
Cambridge. Wow.
Yeah. Who then approached me.
All right. So we're approaching the last 2 questions. So the first question, I mean, for the last 2, the first one is about Mindshop, about the Knowledge Society. And you were with me from the start. Remember, I told you this idea of this Knowledge Society. I was only imagining.
Well done for doing it.
Thank you. It's been a great ride, and we're only just beginning. We finished our first year now in April, and we're growing a lot. The last group I opened, there were 600 people interested, and 120 people got in. Became a member.
I didn't realize you were selective.
Well, it's not actually selective. I mean, there's limits of how many people I can.
Served.
Yeah, exactly. And we broke the record. I've been trying to keep this in order, because I don't want it to get out of control. So I'm trying to increase it at an interesting, at a quality over quantity. So before I accepted all these students, I took a group of 40, and then a 50, and then that's how it's been growing. The first group was 12 people, so I've been doing it gradually.
I remember, yes.
Yeah. So the question is, well, I think many people don't really try to take time to do projects that take a long time to grow. Like tend to those trees that would take hundreds of years to grow. And my idea with Mindshop is for it to outlive us all, to become something that outlives me and many of our members, and really becomes a force through time in education, right? Mm-hmm. On this note, how can we design a society that can make a significant and permanent impact on the world without being entangled in governmental and corporate agendas. No, how could we build something that lasts? What key principles would you think about for this?
Keep it simple would be when you say without getting involved in government and so on, you only get involved in government if you choose to. So no, I keep it simple, stick to philosophy.
Keep it simple.
And stick to the main areas of philosophy. You could start something that goes into more esoteric areas at some point, but okay. Philosophy is timeless. Philosophy will last forever. You could maybe start a discussion about to what extent philosophy is timeless.
Yeah, definitely. We have some debates, like in every, well, not in every cycle. I call them cycles. The courses we do. The first one I do some tutorials on debating, and we have organized debates. But the subjects are not at first not always philosophical, because I want people to train and to understand the concept of debating first. But would you think that would be something desirable to have in the society for people to start conversations?
Well, philosophy is a conversation, isn't it? Unless you argue, what's the point? It's by arguing with each other you find the truth. If you say P and I say not P, I want to know your reasons for saying P, because if I don't, I might be wrong myself.
Yeah.
And so it would be irrational of me not to ask you why you believe something that I think is wrong. Because if you explain your reasons, I might come to believe it true too. And by the same token, of course, you should do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, to study our motives, right? Our reasons for believing P or...
Well, it's interesting. In fact, I had an interesting experience last night.
Really?
I was invited to a drinks party, and one of the people there was somebody I argue with often. I argue with productively, enjoyably, always with courtesy on each side and interest on each side. And although we completely disagree on many things,
that's hard, isn't it?
I think we would both agree that we enjoy the argument. But there was another person there last night whose method of arguing was completely the opposite. Basically, it was make your voice louder, speak over anyone who disagrees, tell them they're stupid. And I immediately shut down, and so did this chap that I argue with the result that nothing useful was gained from the evening. And I thought, you see, I believe, and I must have said this to you before, the principle of charity is the thing that must govern philosophy. If you disagree with me, then as I'm rational, and I believe you to be rational, I must find out why you believe this thing that I don't believe. I want to know your reasons. And I want you to explain your reasons so I understand. If I don't understand why you believe it, then I haven't yet understood. And that's opening yourself to the arguments of others is so crucially important to finding the truth.
Yeah, I completely agree, because the fact that someone believes something and people that don't agree with that belief already consider a priori before even listening to the person that they are stupid or
wrong. But that's a sign of irrationality, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if two rational people are such that they have contradictory beliefs, one of them must be wrong.
Yeah.
And how do I know it's not me?
That's Aristotle, right? I mean, that's one of the principles of logic from Aristotle. Like it's either
Yes.
P or not P. Yeah, it's one of the, yeah, completely. And wouldn't you agree that the way the internet works and how social media is, that doesn't really help, right?
Well, I've recently, I used to be on both Twitter and Facebook professionally.
I remember Twitter. Yeah.
And I stopped because I inadvertently started a Twitter storm.
Really?
And it was so distressing. And so, I mean, I was getting hundreds of emails telling me I was an evil cow and you know, this, that. I mean, it was horrible. And I just thought and they hadn't listened to what I said at all. And they weren't going to listen to what I said. This was just an outpouring of hate.
Yeah.
And I just thought, no, I'm about to retire. I don't have to do this. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, and I remember if I ever told you, Marianne, but my dissertation on kings, on my master's, was on the philosophical and ethical underpinnings of these kinds of business models, the big data business models.
All right.
Social media. Yeah, also social media, that's included. But for example, Uber, Airbnb, all of the businesses these days that are data-driven business models that are very, you know, it's philosophy of technology at the end. And it's really scary. I mean, the problems that, I mean, after doing the research, putting in the hours, putting in the work, there are some serious problems that are happening, and not everyone is aware of them. It's something.
Oh, I think they're very serious problems. I mean, I think but I think they're also very intractable problems. I mean, the problem of hiding behind anonymity,
yeah,
in order to spread hate. I mean, how do you deal with that? Because there can't be anything rational about that. Surely there must be something instinctual about it.
There's a talk from the chap that purchased TED. You know, the TED Talks. This guy, he's British, and he actually gave a talk in Oxford, and he spoke about how the internet we have appeals to our most
base instincts.
Base instincts. Yes, this is something that is already in many places, and we kind of know this, but we at the same time it seems like we don't know. We let ourselves go with emotion, and we stop, you know, thinking when the emotion bursts. People just, you know, hate, and they write. It's
I mean, again, going back to the principle of charity, what is the point of entering any discussion that isn't governed by charity? You're not going to learn anything from it.
Yeah.
So it's pointless.
I agree. It's pointless. Well, anyways, moving on to the last question. So the last question is, I was inspired by an interview that was made to Bertrand Russell, this English philosopher, and the interviewer asks for Bertrand to give a message into the future. Perhaps you've seen this interview, but the question is this one. Let's imagine this knowledge society, Mindshop, fulfills its vision. It lasts for a considerable amount of time. I don't know, hundreds of years, thousands of years, I don't know. The question is, what message would you send to these future thinkers across time when it comes to learning and doing philosophy?
Well, I'm the same one I'm giving to present day ones. I mean, I have no idea of the context in which these people will be working.
True.
But I'm absolutely sure that the principle of charity should still govern their conversations.
Okay.
Could we be having conversations of the sort that we can't even imagine? I mean, just as the internet would have been unimaginable 100 years ago. I mean, they may be having conversations across the solar system or whatever. But the fact is, if they are conversations, and if people hope to learn from them, then charity will be needed. I mean, I hope that in 100 years' time or 200 years' time, they will have found a way of dealing with this hate business. I mean, it must be education, must be the way to do it. But we obviously haven't got there yet.
I completely agree. So just as a review, so the principle of charity, because I'm sure some people are not familiar with the principle of charity. So essentially, I'm just going to read a small little bit on it. So in philosophy, the principle of charity or charitable interpretation requires interpreting a speaker's statement in the most rational way possible. And in the case of any argument, considering its best, strongest possible interpretation. Okay.
Yes, I would put it slightly differently. In fact, I'm tempted here if I can find.
Of course, yeah.
Hang on.
No worries, no worries, no rush.
It's one of my favorite quotations, but of course,
amazing.
I have to be able to find it.
Yeah. I mean, how are you on time? Do you have an appointment?
I'm okay at the moment.
You're okay at the moment? Okay.
Luckily, it's still, when I was underlining things in red in my books.
Okay. What's the name of the book?
It's Donald Davidson's Truth and Interpretation.
Ah, Donald Davidson. I saw his arguments on physicalism at King's College.
Yes, you would have done. Yes.
Yeah, I did some of his arguments on anomalous monism.
Yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, it's Sod's Law. I'm not going to be able to find this, but he says
we can do this. You can send it to me later, and I can add it to the video. I can post it on the description, perhaps.
Okay, why don't you do that? Because well,
you have a lot of bits underlined.
Well, no, this is a book I became my Bible for a while. No, I'll do that, Mateus, because
sure, no worries. But I mean, the general idea is out there.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing. I mean, I didn't like the first part of what you said when you said we must interpret in the most rational way. I mean, that just sounds as if we must be rational. But actually, it's when we work together, we must take our opponent to be rational, not we must be rational. It's true, we must be rational. We all must also believe the other person is rational.
It says it requires interpreting a speaker's statement, interpreting it in the most rational way. But you're saying it's taking the speaker as rational.
Interpreting it in what to you seems to be the most rational way.
It's taking the person to be.
Taking him to be rational, him or her, yeah.
Him or her to be the most rational. Very well. Well, Marianne, this has been amazing, as always. When I talk to you, I really connect with good philosophy, to put it in a certain way. So
well done for getting your project off the ground so well.
Thank you. Yes, you've been a great part of this. Every time I teach a class zero, that I call it, I give like free lectures for people to understand what philosophy is. I always give thanks to the people that have helped me, and you're over there on the list, always in the top people that have.
Lovely. Well, thank you.
All right. Well, have a great day, Marianne. Thanks a lot for your time. And
okay.
Hope to see you soon and do this again sometime. Okay.
Okay. Thanks,
Bye.
Mateus.
Take
Bye.
care.